The Young and the Restless spoilers. The resurrection of Jordan, a reckoning in Genoa. The people of Genoa thought they had seen the last of Jordan. Her supposed demise had brought a fragile peace to the small, tension-laden town, but deep down, no one truly believed it was over. They whispered about her, a ghost of vengeance, a shadow that would not fade. And they were right. Jordan's story wasn't finished, it was only just beginning. Buried but not forgotten, Nikki Newman had taken every precaution to ensure Jordan's story ended atop that desolate mountain. It wasn't murder in Nikki's eyes, it was justice, a desperate act to protect her loved ones from Jordan's endless schemes. As the storm clouds loomed that fateful night, Nikki had driven to the peak, her hands trembling but resolute. She buried Jordan herself, under layers of dirt and rock, leaving behind nothing but an unmarked grave and her own guilt. But nature had other plans. Days turned into weeks, and the relentless rain began to erode the mountain's defenses. The earth shifted, the dirt softened, and the remnants of Jordan's grave began to stir. A hand, pale and weathered, emerged from the soil, a horrifying sight against the backdrop of lightning splitting the sky. Jordan had clawed her way back to the world of the living, driven not by survival instincts but by an unrelenting thirst for revenge. She wasn't just alive. She was reborn. A town on edge, Genoa remained blissfully unaware of Jordan's return, at least for a time. The small town had other dramas to contend with, business rivalries, family betrayals, and the perpetual tug-of-war between loyalty and ambition. But whispers began to circulate when strange things started happening. Lights flickering in homes near the mountains. Footsteps echoing in the dead of night. A chilling breeze that seemed to follow certain townsfolk wherever they went. Those closest to Nikki noticed her growing paranoia. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something terrible. She confided in her closest allies as Victor, Jack, and Sharon, but even they dismissed her concerns as the guilt of her actions weighing on her conscience. But Nikki knew better. She had stared into Jordan's eyes before. Those eyes weren't gone. They were watching. The first strike when the news broke that Cole Abbott had gone missing, panic swept through Genoa. Cole wasn't just a pillar of the community, he was a father, a protector, and the kind of man who would never simply disappear. His daughter, Claire, was inconsolable, clinging to the belief that her father would return. And he did. But not in the way anyone expected. Cole's lifeless body was found near the edge of the forest, a single note pinned to his chest. Written in Jordan's unmistakable handwriting, it read, "One debt repaid. One still owed." The town was in shock. While the tragedy devastated Claire, it also confirmed what Nikki had feared all along: Jordan was alive. And she wasn't done. Claire, the target, Jordan's ultimate goal wasn't just revenge for her own perceived injustices, it was to dismantle the lives of those she believed had wronged her. And at the heart of her vendetta was Claire. The young woman represented everything Jordan despised: innocence, hope, and the potential for a future untainted by darkness. For Claire, the days that followed her father's death were unbearable. She felt the weight of everyone's expectations, their need for her to remain strong in the face of tragedy. But deep down, she knew she was being hunted. She could feel it in the way shadows seemed to linger too long in the corners of her vision, in the way her name seemed to echo faintly in the wind. Nikki vowed to protect her. But promises only go so far when facing someone as relentless as Jordan. The final confrontation, the climax, unfolded on a stormy night, the kind of night Genoa seemed cursed to endure. Jordan lured Claire to the same mountain where she herself had been buried. It was poetic in a macabre way. Claire, terrified but determined, faced Jordan with a defiance that surprised even herself. But she wasn't alone. Cole may have been gone, but his presence loomed large. His sacrifice had given Claire the strength to stand her ground. And, unbeknownst to her, help was on the way. Nikki, Victor, and Jack raced against time to reach the mountain, their desperation fueling every step. The confrontation was raw and chaotic. Words were exchanged, Jordan's venomous accusations against Nikki, Claire's tearful pleas for mercy, and Nikki's desperate attempts to reason with the woman she had once buried alive. But Jordan wasn't interested in reason. She wanted an ending. And she got one. A sacrifice for redemption. Just as Jordan lunged at Claire, a gunshot rang out. Nikki stood at the edge of the scene, her hands trembling as the smoking barrel of the pistol pointed squarely at Jordan. But it wasn't the bullet that ended Jordan's reign of terror. It was the mountain. The ground beneath her began to crumble, the earth reclaiming what it had once tried to bury. Jordan let out a final, chilling laugh as the ground gave way, her body disappearing into the abyss below. It was a fitting end for a woman who had defied death itself, a return to the darkness from which she had emerged. Aftermath, the price of survival. In the days that followed, Genoa struggled to make sense of what had happened. Claire mourned her father but found solace in the fact that his sacrifice had not been in vain. Nikki, though relieved, carried the weight of her actions, knowing that Jordan's death, this time, presumably final, would haunt her forever. But the scars Jordan left behind ran deep. Genoa might have survived her vengeance, but the town would never be the same. And as the storm clouds finally parted, revealing a fragile dawn, one lingering question remained: was it really over? Because in Genoa, the past has a way of refusing to stay buried. This story could easily set the stage for more drama, should you want additional plotlines, twists, or future arcs. Let me know if you'd like further elaboration. Here's a revised and more intense version of the story, incorporating your feedback. Jordan's departure will be more dramatic, leaving behind a haunting legacy that impacts everyone, while the emotional complexity of Claire's reaction and Jordan's unresolved hatred will be central to the narrative. The relentless spirit of Jordan, a legacy of revenge. Jordan's death was supposed to be the end, a conclusion to the chaos she unleashed on Genoa, a sigh of relief for the Newmans, and closure for the town. But her exit wasn't peaceful, nor was it quiet. It was explosive, haunting, and unforgettable. Jordan didn't just leave a hole in the ground where the mountain swallowed her, she left wounds in the hearts of everyone she touched. For Claire Newman, the death of Jordan wasn't a victory. It was a tragedy she couldn't fully comprehend, a woman consumed by hatred for reasons that were shrouded in mystery. And as Genoa reeled from Jordan's final act, the town's residents found themselves asking a question they had long avoided: why were they so unwilling to change, to confront the demons that had festered among them for years? A life built on vengeance. Jordan's hatred for the Newmans was no secret, but her motives remained an enigma. Why had she chosen them as the target of her relentless rage? The answers, if they existed, were buried deep in the past, in the shadows of decisions made and lives altered long before Claire was even born. For Claire, the unanswered questions ate at her. As she stood at the edge of the mountain where Jordan had met her end, she couldn't stop the tears from falling. She didn't mourn Jordan as a friend or even an ally. She mourned the life Jordan could have had, the woman she might have been if revenge hadn't consumed her. Why? Claire whispered into the wind, hoping the mountain might echo back an answer. But the silence was deafening. A death too violent to forget. Jordan's final moments were anything but gentle. When Nikki pulled the trigger, it wasn't just a bullet that struck Jordan, it was decades of betrayal, fear, and guilt. But Jordan didn't fall easily. The shot barely slowed her. Instead, it seemed to fuel her, like the pain only sharpened her focus. "You think you've won?" Jordan spat, blood staining her teeth as she spoke. Her voice was venomous, her laughter chilling. "This isn't the end, Nikki. You'll never be free of me." And then the ground beneath her gave way. But even as the earth swallowed her, Jordan's presence lingered. Her screams echoed in the wind, her laughter reverberating through the cracks of the mountain. It wasn't just her death, it was an event that seemed to curse the land itself. The storm intensified, and Genoa's residents later swore the mountain felt alive, as if Jordan's spirit had seeped into its core. The aftermath, a town on the edge. Genoa was never the same after Jordan's demise. Her death wasn't just the end of a feud, it was a mirror held up to the entire town, forcing them to confront their own complicity in the chaos. For the Newmans, the wounds were deepest. Nikki, who had been forced to take a life yet again, was haunted by Jordan's final words. She began to question every decision she had ever made, every alliance she had formed, and every enemy she had created. Victor, usually stoic and unshakable, found himself quietly reflective, recognizing that his family's power and influence had come at a steep cost. But it was Claire who bore the heaviest burden. She couldn't forget the look in Jordan's eyes, the hatred, yes, but also the pain. It was as if Jordan's vendetta wasn't entirely her own, as if she had been carrying the weight of someone else's grudge. Claire couldn't help but wonder, was Jordan a villain, or was she just another victim in the tangled web of the Newman legacy? Claire's search for the truth unable to let go, Claire began digging into Jordan's past, searching for the origins of her hatred. What she found shocked her, fragments of a life torn apart by decisions made long before Claire's time. Business deals gone wrong. Betrayals swept under the rug. Lives ruined in the pursuit of power. The Newman family's history was littered with collateral damage, and Jordan was just one name on a very long list. But what made Jordan different? Why had she chosen to fight back when so many others had simply disappeared into obscurity? The deeper Claire dug, the more she realized that Jordan's hatred wasn't random, it was personal. And the more she uncovered, the more she began to question her own family's role in the tragedy. A legacy of change? Jordan's death may have ended her rampage, but her presence continued to loom over Genoa. For the first time, the town's residents began to reflect on their own lives. Why were they so quick to cling to old rivalries, to perpetuate cycles of revenge and betrayal? Why did they wait for someone like Jordan to force them to confront their own flaws? Some began to change. Jack Abbott, shaken by how close his own family had come to becoming collateral damage, vowed to rebuild his relationships. Nikki, haunted by her actions, began to push for reconciliation among her loved ones. Even Victor, stubborn as ever, began to soften, if only slightly. But not everyone was ready to change. Some saw Jordan's death as a victory, a confirmation that power and control would always win. And as long as those people existed, the seeds of chaos remained. Claire's dilemma for Claire, the hardest part was knowing she couldn't fix what had happened. Jordan was gone, and no amount of answers would bring her back. But that didn't mean she would stop searching. She felt an inexplicable connection to Jordan, not as a friend, but as a symbol of something greater. In her heart, Claire knew that the cycle of hatred could only be broken if someone had the courage to truly change. She didn't know if she was strong enough to be that person, but she was willing to try. And as she stood on the mountain one last time, staring into the abyss that had claimed Jordan, she made a silent vow, "Your story won't be forgotten. I'll make sure of it." A storm still brewing. Jordan's death wasn't the end. It was a catalyst, a spark that ignited a fire within Genoa. For some, it was a fire of reflection and growth. For others, it was a fire of vengeance and ambition. And for Claire, it was a fire of curiosity, burning brighter with every unanswered question. As the storm clouds finally began to clear, one thing became certain: Genoa was forever changed. But whether that change would be for better or worse remained to be seen. This version leaves Jordan's legacy lingering as a force of change while delving into the emotional complexity of her death and its impact on Claire, the Newmans, and the entire town. Let me know if you'd like further tweaks.